Hi Jonathan, welcome back to Field Trip Friday. Today we're going to be taking a look at Whitemud Clay Studios.
Rivers carry clay to the ocean, so and it got layered. It kind of stratigraphy. And the heavier particles, the stuff with sand and rock and stuff, settle down to the bottom first, and then as the clay particles are plate shaped, so as they're floating around in the water, the ones that are the biggest plate shapes stay in the water the longest, and they end up being at the top. The other stuff settles to the bottom, so it's in distinct layers. That's the clay pit over there. That's actually where they go and dig. Oh. So yeah, I'll just. So typically, I would come up here with a half ton and a tractor, and what I do is I take a whole bunch of clay back to Eastend. There's a farm a half a mile outside of Eastend that lets me store big piles. Like you can see here, what they're doing is they're driving down there and they're taking different layers of clay out. These layers aren't really obvious, but they can tell there's ways. There's a guy that comes out here, and so he knows they're some kind of a fossil or a marine fossil that's at certain layers. And he knows when the tractor starts picking those up that he's into the next layer down. And I think they pull about 10 they use up about 10,000 metric ton in Medicine Hat in making clay. They make clay and ship it out to everywhere in North America. So I do it a little differently, and you'll see what I'm doing when I'm in town is I liquefy the clay. So I've got a thing called a plunger that I whip it up. It just creates a lot of turbulence, and it turns it to a thick cream, and then I pour it through a vibrating screen that I built with all these machines I built, and then I collect it in a wheelbarrow and out to these drying fields. The stuff is pretty liquidy that I pour into here. And then after that, it's just straight evaporation. The outside edges just sort of dry the most quickly. So typically, I have that stack of them there. There's 6 or 8 of them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I have this whole area sort of covered with these things. And I just go from one to the other, filling them, and then same thing with taking them apart. And I just work my way around the outside edges as I'm taking the clay out.
Yeah.
And I take the clay out and take it indoors, where I have a machine called a pug mill that it's kind of like a big gigantic sausage maker. It's 3.5 inch kind of sausage that comes out of it. This machine that I'm going to be working at is called a plunger.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, it just, it's got some stirring paddles. It's a 45-gallon drum. It's got a water, I've got a hose just with water and a tap there. And I just dump in enough water so that the clay gets mixed up to a certain consistency. And if it's still too thick, I just add a bit more water and let it stir for a while. And it's not actually stirring, it's volatile action. You'll hear lumps of clay being fired up and hitting the lid as it's going. And typically, I don't wear very good clothes when I do this because I usually get covered with clay. But I think I should be able to not have that happen today. I'm just going to turn this thing on. then I would just continue doing this till I filled this right up. And you know, because it's sitting on a sloped ground, normally what I do is I have an automotive jack that I would jack this end up so that it's level, so that I can fill it right to the top.
Right.
3 weeks, it starts to cool off in in August and September, in the evenings especially. But this kind of weather really takes the water out of it quickly. But that's the process.
That is amazing. That is big.
Yeah, so it's 3.5 inch pot, and this weighs maybe 16 pounds. And I use dead deep freezers or just airtight containers. Yeah. And as I use it up and it's halfway down, say, then I start covering it with plastic, just so that air above doesn't dry the top side.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and then I repug anyway, so it doesn't make a lot of difference. But, yeah.